G'day everyone and welcome to Catholic Ed South Australia and Microsoft Education's remote learning webinar number 3. And this is all about OneNote and Class Notebook. My name is Troy Waller. I am a learning delivery specialist from Microsoft, which is a fancy way of saying I am a former teacher, and I'm a former primary teacher at that. My role is to travel around Vic, Tas and South Australia, occasionally WA, and turn teachers on to the amazing stuff they can do with Microsoft. And obviously now in this remote learning context that we have all now well and truly entered into, about showing you how you can use the best of Microsoft to reach your students, right? And for the students also to be able to reach you. So looking at things like feedback and assignments and all that kind of thing. For our first two webinars, the first one was all about Teams and about video conferencing and how to access that. So if you haven't seen that webinar, please go back and access that, and I'll share that link with you in a moment and where you're able to access those. The second one was all about Office 365 and building your Office 365 environment and how to access that properly. So please go back and look at that as well. So understand that this webinar is built on the other two. So please, if you haven't had a chance to go back and explore those other two, please do. All right, so this is our landing page and also our launching page for everything to do with remote learning from the Microsoft stack. So it's aka.ms/Microsoft Remote Learning. Please go in there and have a look. There's links to other webinars from other states and other sectors, etc. And there's some great stuff for IT managers. There's some great stuff for teachers, great stuff for school leaders, and hopefully everything that you need is going to be there. The other thing that we have for you is we have your guide to facilitating learning online, which has been published by Catholic Ed South Australia. I've got Deb here as well, and she can come off mute and say hi to you and tell you all about this.
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Deb Kroger from the Learning and Technologies team in Catholic Ed SA. The website there has a host of information for you around remote learning and learning online. And yeah, if you've got any questions from a CSER perspective, feel free to email me.
Wonderful, very good. All right, so what we're going to do today is we're going to explore the Microsoft Educator community first. Then we're going to talk about OneNote, where to get it, what it looks like. Then I'll have a little bit of a play around the anatomy of OneNote, how it's structured, show you some of the really cool things you can do with OneNote. Then we'll get into Class Notebook, and then we'll jump into Teams as well, and we'll show how Class Notebook integrates so well with Teams. Next steps, a few things for you to be able to access, and also we'll have a bit of a Q&A time. Now, what I will try to remember to do during this webinar is I'll try to remember to stop and take your questions. There is a Q&A button. If you have a look at your screen, you should see a little bit of a Q&A button there. And I've got the lovely Anna from the Microsoft Store in Sydney. I'm going to get her to come off mute and say hi as well, because she's going to be answering your questions by text, and she's also going to be feeding those questions to me to answer orally. So why don't you say hi, Anna?
Hi everybody. Yeah, so feel free to pop in some questions in the Q&A and I'll do my best to assist you. So yeah. Excellent.
Very good. Okay, so this is the Microsoft Educator Center, education.microsoft.com. Again, education.microsoft.com, and please notice that there is no www. I'm going to jump into that now. All we have to do is close that down. All we have to do is type in, as I said, education.microsoft.com, so you can see it there. And this is the start page for the Educator Center. So you need to make sure that you sign in. When you sign in, just use your normal school email address and password, and that should take you in and set you up an account pretty easily. We have individual courses, we have learning paths, and you can also have view your achievements. Now, what's important about viewing your achievements is when you do these courses or when you do these learning paths, it keeps a record, and these are recognised because they meet the AITSL standards. They're recognised by the South Australian Teacher Registration Board, so you can actually print the audit sheet off and you can demonstrate your learning to your school leaders, or if, God forbid, you are audited by the TRB, you can actually present that to them as well. So you don't need to worry about getting certificates and all that kind of stuff when you do a webinar, sorry, when you do a workshop, an online workshop through us. It will actually keep a record in there. So we're not talking about the webinar today, we're talking about the online learning. Now let me share with you how it works. So you've got your courses here, all the courses that you have yet to start, you're in the middle of, or even that you have completed. It'll categorize those for you. And if I wanted to look at something like, for example, we're in OneNote today, this will actually show me all the courses that are relevant to OneNote. All right, so you can see here there's getting started with OneNote, math tools in OneNote, class notebook, etc. And these are all really good courses for you to do, because what we're going to do today is we're going to sort of skim across the top. All right, and this will be a great place for you to go back and get, you know, further, deeper understandings around the tools that you're looking for, or even the areas that you might be looking for. So, for example, to look at something like 21st century learning design, we'll see there's a whole heap of different courses in there. They're not necessarily product focused, but actually more pedagogy focused. So keep an eye out for that as well. When we look at the learning paths are groups of courses that we have built together. So they go in a sort of sequential order. You can jump in and out at your own pace. But if we look at something like OneNote, you'll see that there's some really good courses here, but one in particular that I want to draw your attention to is this one, the OneNote Teacher Academy. Now it's 3.5 hours worth of PD. You can take as long as you want, be as quick as you want, as slow as you want. It's up to you. But you'll see that there's a series of courses here, and they, you know, tend to go in sequential order. All right. So I do want to really recommend that you do that that learning path. So again, it's called OneNote Teacher Academy, and you can search for that easily just by coming into the learning paths area, which is what I did here. Click on the learning paths, and then I typed in OneNote. All right, and then it was really, really easy to find. But I'll make sure that you get some links directly to that today. All right, let's keep going. So that's the Educator Centre. Now, in terms of OneNote and where OneNote lives and how to get OneNote, etc. First of all, OneNote is everywhere. Okay, so you've definitely got it on your PC, you've got it on your Mac, you've got it on your iPhone, you've got it on your iPad, you've got it on your Android tablets and your Android phones as well. There are dedicated apps that you can access, all right? So no matter where you are, no matter what device you've got, you can access OneNote. But of course, those experiences are all going to be very different. It's going to be very different using OneNote on an iPad than it is using OneNote on a PC or on a phone, right? So obviously there's going to be different features for different products, but please get OneNote onto as many devices as you can, and then you have that convenience of being able to go across devices. Now, when we talk about PCs, though, it gets a little bit confusing because there are two versions of OneNote. There's OneNote, the app, the universal app, and then there's OneNote 2016. Now, OneNote 2016 is the older version of OneNote that used to be inside Office. It's no longer inside Office. It's now a standalone app that comes free for Windows, for your Mac, for your phones, etc. But we found that there were people that really enjoyed the old OneNote 2016, that the setup and the features and all that kind of thing. So rather than retire that, we're letting that continue. So you've got two versions of OneNote. Okay. Now, my suggestion to you is if you are brand new to OneNote, don't bother so much with 2016. In fact, don't bother at all. Just go straight into the OneNote app. And also introduce your students to the OneNote app. The reason why is because this is the one that is going to be continually built. This is the one where features will be continue to be added, whereas OneNote 2016 has an end date and it's going to eventually be retired. So if you are really into OneNote though, and you really enjoy OneNote 2016 and that's where you've always been, please feel free to continue using it or even use both. All right. What I've suggested to some teachers is use OneNote 2016 yourself when building things, but then push that out via the app to the students. So the teachers need to have both on their machines so they can instruct their students. But some of these features and some of the setup over here, teachers still love. So again, if you are happily using 2016, please integrate use of the app. But if you've never used OneNote or rarely used OneNote, my suggestion to you is move out of the, don't even bother with the 2016 and go straight into the app. Now, the other thing that we've got is we've got OneNote Online. So this is through the browser. So we have dedicated apps on your Mac and your PC and all that kind of thing, but we have a browser-based app, which means that when you come through, whether it's Firefox or Chrome or Microsoft Edge, whatever the browser is that you're trying to use, when you use that app, it's always going to look the same. So whether you're coming in on a PC, whether you're coming in on your Mac, whether you're coming in on your iPad browser, you will still get the same experience. All right, so I just want to encourage you that if you've got a school with a bring your own device program where you're not knowing what the kids are using, or of course now we're in a remote access world and remote learning world where the kids are at home using goodness knows what devices, it's really good to make OneNote Online your base product for everybody to be using, because that way you know everybody has the same features and everybody can pretty much do the same thing. All right, so again, my advice to you is if you are if you don't know what devices the students are using because you haven't got a BYOD program at your school and now these kids are at home, we don't know what devices they're using, please think about using OneNote Online as your go-to, and we'll have a bit of a play with that as we go through later. All right, so remembering that we sign into Office 365 by going to www.office.com. Please remember you can install your 5 copies of Office onto your PCs and Macs. So you've got 5 different 5 copies that you can install from that subscription, and that goes for your students as well. So you can help them get onto the latest, greatest versions of Office. All right. But we sign in, as I said, using our school ID and our usual password, and that's how we get into there. And as you saw a moment ago, OneNote Online just lives there, and that's how we can access that. All right. Okay, so keep moving. Let's talk about the anatomy of OneNote. Okay, so what I mean by that is when we think about OneNote, OneNote is actually built on the idea of a ring binder or a lever arch binder. So once upon a time, I would have, I'm just going to use my mouse here, I would have a row of these perhaps on a shelf, or maybe even multiple shelves full of my ring binders, and inside I would have colored dividers which would separate my pages, and then in between those I would have the relevant pages. So one of these notebooks might have been, one of these ring binders might have been for maths, one of them might have been for literacy, or one of them's for spelling, and one of them's for reading, and one of them's for writing, or however it is that we used to organize our stuff, and possibly even still do. OneNote is built on the same idea. All right, so within OneNote, we have notebooks, which are our ring binders. We have sections, which is our colored dividers, and then we have pages, which live in between, right? So what I want to do is I want to take you and show you how that looks. All right, so when I come into my OneNote page, and you can see here I am now in the OneNote Windows 10 app, and that's what I'm going to largely move through today. But you can see here that I've got, when I open up one of these sections, you can see that I've got my colored dividers. All right, so here's all my notebooks. All right, so these are all the notebooks that I work with. Okay, each one of these are like an individual ring binder, and you can see I've even got a little picture to remind you of that. But then I have my colored dividers. So when I click on one of my colored dividers, all the pages that are inside those colored dividers appears here. All right, and these pages are already open. Right, so when I click on that, it becomes basically a limitless canvas, and everything is an object that can be moved. So I can just highlight things like this, and I can be grabbing those, okay? Whether I'm using graphics or text or anything, everything is a an object to be moved around. So that's where it's very different to Word. Word doesn't give us that kind of flexibility. It resembles more like a PowerPoint slide, except it's this giant piece of butcher's paper that we can write and put all these other things on as well. All right, so again, we have notebooks, we have sections, and then inside each of these sections, I have my pages. Okay, so that's really important to understand just the anatomy. All right, now we notice that we have here the notebooks sit at the top, the sections sit down the side, and the pages sit over this side as well. So now what I want to do is I want to take you through and I want to show you the different tabs, okay, and some of the things that we can do inside OneNote. Now the first tab we have is our Home tab, which lives up here, and you can see it's very much like Word in that we've got, you know, just the basics of our text formatting, bold, italic, underline. We can highlight. We've got a format painter. You know, we can play with the justification and indents and numbering and all that kind of thing as well. The other thing that we've got in here is the ability to dictate. So inside actually what I'm going to do just quickly is I'm just going to come back to this. I'm just going to add a page here because I want to show you that I can just type straight into a OneNote page. Remember, I told you this becomes an object, right, that can be moved around. But for some of our kids, they may have trouble with the with text and trouble with typing, or maybe they don't. It's just easier for them to dictate. So I want to show you what dictate looks like. You can dictate into multiple languages. Okay, so you can see that English with an Australian accent, and you have to forgive me, I'm working from home today and my dog is going to bark in the background. I also have my kids and my wife here as well, by the way, and I can hear one of them now running down to silence the dog. So this is going to be able to detect different accents. So obviously we want to go English Australia, and then what I do is I click on the dictate button, and when I do, a little light will come up here. And now it should be listening to me, full stop, new line. You're going to be looking at this and thinking, is it working, question mark? And you may be thinking, no, it's not, exclamation point. But after a little while, we will see it catch up and everything will be wonderful, new line. You're going to be amazed, exclamation point. All right. So we had a little bit of an issue there, but largely you can see that it caught up with me. Something over here like new line, it missed that one rather than actually bringing me into a new line, and for some reason it put my exclamation point up there. But still, the more you use it, you'll know how fast and slow you get to use, and it's a really good way for students to be able to access the power of OneNote. All right, so that's that. So right across the top there, again, remembering that it does some of the things that Word does, but it's not going to take the place of Word, because Word is your word processing tool, and OneNote, while it has some word processing features, it's not going to do everything that Word can do. All right, now on the Insert tab, we have the ability to insert tables. Okay, again, not as great as Excel, not as great as Word, but it will do some of that. We can embed files, right? So I can grab a file on my machine, and I can insert that into my OneNote page. I can also print out a page. So if I've got a PDF, it will actually print onto the page, which would look something like this here. Okay, so it just prints that PDF page onto the page for me. It's now no longer editable or manipulatable, but it means that I can write over the top of it and take notes, etc., like that. The other thing we can do is we can insert pictures. All right, so we can insert pictures from files, we can insert pictures from the camera on our machine, and we can also insert pictures from Bing. So we can use Bing images and search for things as well, which is important because we don't want kids to be jumping in and out of different windows, etc. We want to keep them all in the app where possible. I can also insert online videos. Okay, so if I have a link for a YouTube clip, I can throw that in, and then of course that's going to look something like this. So you can see here that I threw the link in, and then it automatically creates a little thumbnail, and if I make that nice and big, that can actually be watched from inside the OneNote page. So if I click play now,
Hi, it's Mr. Anderson, and in this video...
Okay, so, and that could be maximized to the whole screen, or I can just zoom in just like I would on any other page, all right? So we can see how this is doing much more than Word ever did, right? Embedding videos and being able to move them around, everything really difficult in Word. We can also throw in links, okay? So we can insert links. If we've got links to other web pages, we can throw those in, or links to Office documents, etc. I can record audio into my page and leave a little audio file. I can connect to my Outlook calendar. We've got the ability to throw in symbols, equations. You've got a maths feature, which I'd like to show you at another time. I'll take you through and show you all the amazing things you can do with that. You can throw in stickers as well. So just like you would with a student's workbook, you can throw stickers in, you can customize those stickers and throw text in and all kinds of fun stuff. The other thing I want to draw your attention to is Researcher. Now, what Researcher does is, instead of students just jumping out into Google and or some other search engine and just getting, you know, whatever conspiracy theories or whatever it is that happens to come up in the search field, what Researcher will do is it will only take the students to reputable websites for the information. So it'll take them to things like, you know, published newspapers and magazines. It will take them to peer-reviewed articles and that kind of stuff. It won't allow them to actually, you know, find information that is just sort of from left field. And then when a student finds something like that, let me just show you. I'll just give you an example. So if we were to look for something like remote learning, you can see what happens here. We've got websites, we've got journals, and as I bring that into my page, as I bring that into my page and add that, okay, it starts to build, not only to throw the link in, but it actually starts to build a bibliography for me as well. And then we can also bring forms in, all right? So you can also bring assessments and other kinds of forms that you want to bring in. Now, in terms of drawing, if you have a touch and stylus enabled device, then you're going to have a really nice experience with OneNote. If you don't, you can still have a good experience with OneNote, but it won't be as good as if you're in a touch and stylus enabled environment. So whether that's a Windows device with a pen, or whether that's maybe an iPad or something like that. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to bring this down into here. You guys can't see what I'm doing, but trust me, I'm actually doing something, because I want to show you what this looks like. So I'm going to have to stop sharing, and I'm going to have to reshare my screen. Just give me a moment. All right, and so now I'm inside the OneNote page, and it's a bit hard, obviously not a bit hard, it's impossible for you to see, but I'm actually starting to draw. So if and I've got a stylus here, so if I open up my pen, you can see I can start to write my name right onto my page, so we don't lose the power of the pen when we're using OneNote. If I am missing, excuse me, if I am missing my pen, I lost my pen, that's okay. I can still draw with touch, right? And that's really good for the iPad users as well. I can do things like draw shapes, for example. So if I wanted to draw a square or a rectangle, it'll allow me. And then the other thing I've got is what's called ink to shape, because if you watch me, when I start to draw triangles or squares or rectangles, I'm pretty hopeless. And you think about the way you might use this with the littlies as well. When I click on ink to shape, now what happens when I draw my triangle, it actually perfects it for me. All right, so it's able to take those shapes and, whoop, that's so bad, it didn't even fix that one up. It'll actually take those shapes and change them for me. The other thing too I've got is my ink to text button. So if I wanted to say my name is Troy, all right, and then I use my lasso tool, I highlight that, and then I click ink to text, and it will actually turn that into text for me. The other thing I've got is I've got a ruler to help me with, excuse me, I've got a ruler to help me with ruling lines and also measuring angles, which is nice. And you can see up here all the different kinds of pens and pencils, etc. that I've got, and it'll simulate those for you, which is pretty cool. All right, so that's the draw features. Now, if you forgive me, I'm going to jump back into my other screen. I'm going to have to drag that up, so just give me a moment. I'm going to move that away, and look at that, you get to see the back end of my PowerPoint. And there's the back end of our webinar there. So stop sharing that, and now I'm going to reshare, include my system audio, screen 2, and there we are. We're all back, which is cool. All right, so I'm just going to turn that ruler off, and I'm going to keep going through here. Now, the other thing we can do is with the View tab is we're able to change the page colors, which is nice. Maybe a little bit hard for you to see here, but you can see all the different colors we could change the page to. Really easy to do. The other thing is we can rule lines. Now this is really good, especially when the kids are using it as a digital notebook. They can actually just have pen and paper experience just like they would in a notebook and be taking notes, etc. The other thing you can do is you can throw in grid lines, so you can be using it for maths, for example. So you could start to draw your shapes, you could plot points, you could draw histograms, all that kind of stuff in there as well. Another thing that's nice is the ability to translate, so we can translate into and from multiple languages. And over here you've got the replay button, and the replay button is really quite nice because what the replay button does is it will show us everything that's happened on the page in order. So when I click replay and I highlight the page, you look what happens here. It actually starts to draw the page out exactly as I did, so I can see everything that happened and the order it happened. And so sometimes when we're talking about sequence and other things, it's really good for a teacher to be able to go back and look at their students' work and actually see it in order. All right, now in terms of the help, you can actually get your ask your questions in here. You can give feedback, and we've also got some training that you can access in here, and also you can see the what's new features, which is also cool. All right, so that's the anatomy of the OneNote. I wanted to show you what it looks like and some of the things that you can do before we jump into Class Notebook. So Class Notebook is pretty much the piece de resistance of OneNote, especially from a school perspective, and there really isn't anything out there on the market that competes with OneNote and all the cool things that OneNote can do. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take you and show you in the online version, because remember what I said before, that the online version is good because we know that everybody can see the same version. So all we do is we come into office.com, we click on OneNote, and then OneNote will open, and then we can find our OneNotes, right? We can click on the one that we want. In this case, I wanted that Year 12 psychology one. So this is the same OneNote notebook that we were in a moment ago, but now it's the online version, all right? So I can have that open in OneNote Online, OneNote in Mac, OneNote on my PC, all at the same time, OneNote on my phone, and as I make changes in any of those devices, it will be reflected right across my devices, all right? So when I look here, I want to show you first, talking about the anatomy as well. So I want to show you the anatomy of the Class Notebook. All right, so I'm just going to click here to Class Notebook, and you can see that I've got a collaboration space, a content library, a teacher only section, and then I've got all my students. So the idea of this is that I am bringing my entire class into the one space, right? So it's one collaborative notebook. Everybody has access to this. And this one notebook is divided up into sections, divided up into section groups to make sure that we can keep everybody in the spaces they need to be, but also make sure that everybody can collaborate and access everything. So the first thing that we have is what's called the collaboration space. Now, when I open up the collaboration space, and you could see that it's a lot slower the way it works in the online app. You could see it had to actually process, whereas when I was in the Windows 10 app, it was immediate, right? So there's obviously advantages to both. But when I'm inside here in the collaboration space, you can see that I've got all these sections, okay? And these sections I have created to group my students. Now, for example, I might have a whole class section, so maybe this brainstorm section is for everybody, and all the students have read and write access into this, this section, right? But down in these sections, I might want to differentiate. So what I can do is I can actually lock students in and out of groups, right? Make them exclusive and inclusive, depending on the differentiation. So that means they can't get in and mess up each other's group space. So that's the collaboration space. Everybody has read and write access, but I as a teacher can set permissions for different sections. The next thing we have is what's called the content library. And the content library is where I put all my learning content. Now, the thing about the content library is the students have read-only access. I, as a teacher, have read and write access right across the class notebook. I can read and write in every area, but the students here only have read access, which means they can come in and look at my content, but they can't make any changes. They can copy it and take it back into their own space, but they can't make any changes. So all my content is protected. The other thing we have is what's called a teacher only section. I'll talk to you a little bit more later about activating that, but the teacher only section is established for me to have my own private area where I can work. The students can't access this. As a matter of fact, they don't even see it. All right. And then the last sections are all these student sections. So each student has their own space. So Bonnie has her space, Dennis has his space, etc. Now, remembering the students cannot see each other. So inside their own space, they have full read and write access, but they can't see each other. So what that means is we're having a teacher's view here that the teacher can see the collaboration space, the content library, the teacher only space, excuse me, and all the other student spaces. I can see it all, but the students will only see themselves, content, and collaboration. That's all they'll see. All right, so that means they can't get in and mess each other up, and they've got a, you know, privacy and all that kind of thing as well. Now, in terms of what you can do in a class notebook, I want to show you some of the really cool features, because when I've got my whole class, there's a lot of spaces and a lot of things going on. So when I create a class notebook, what I do is I actually create these sections. There's a wizard that takes you through this. And when you create a class notebook, it's easy to do. You just click that button there. But when I create a class notebook, I can create these sections so that every student will have exactly the same sections in their space. Now, that's really important for some of the features we're about to see. Now, one of the things that I can do, let's get down here to my brokers area task. All right, now this is inside Doreena's page. All right, now what I might want to do is I might say that's an excellent piece of work, Dorina, and I want to share that with everyone. So what I can do is I could copy that page directly to the content library. All right, so that means that it's sitting somewhere in the content library. And when I do that, it's going to ask me, where do you want to pop it in the content library? Look at all these different sections that you have created. So let's let that load. And fingers crossed it is, there it is. So there's all my sections. And if you have a look over at my content library, those are all my sections. All right, so I'll decide that I want it to be dropped into maybe learning theory, for example. And then what will happen is that page will be moved across. All right, but I might want to actually move that into another section, or I might be in my content library, for example, and I might look at, let's look at this one here, the notes on brain structure, and I might want to pop that into everybody's space. So what I do is I click here on distribute page, and do I want to distribute it to everybody? Possibly. Do I want to send it to individuals? That is, I want to differentiate. Do I want to send it to groups that I may have created? Or do I even want to send it across notebooks, meaning to other classes? Or maybe I've sent that out before and now I want to delete that, right? I want to retrieve that page from everybody. I can do that as well. But in this case, we're going to send it to everybody. So we click on distribute page. Now what it does is it opens up all my student sections and it says the students all have these sections. Where do you want to put this? And I might say, okay, I want to put this in their research methods section, and then I click distribute. And then it's going to be a little bit slow for us to view today, but in just a few moments, it will appear in everybody's space. It's really quite cool and really quite easy. So that's what we do with distribute pages. Now, remember, we've got those student sections. Maybe at some point I start a new unit. I want to create a new section, right? So I want to send that section out to students, or a group of sections. I can do that as well. We talked about copy to content library. The thing that I really like here is review student work. Now, review student work is really cool because it helps me with my marking. Now, if I had assignments that I had pushed out into, say, quizzes, and then I had to, every time I wanted to go and check a student, I would have to come, I'd go into Anne, I'd go into quizzes, and I would check her work, and then I'd have to go down to the next student. What review student work does, when I click on that, it says, okay, what do you want to review? Let's open up all the student sections. And we said we wanted to go into quizzes. Okay, so I click quizzes, then I click next, and it says, okay, these are all the pages inside that area. So let's say, for example, it's today test, all right, and then I click next. And now what it does is it allows me to look at each one of my students, and I can look at that page inside each one of my student sections. All right, so here's today's test. Okay, and then I can mark them, do everything that I want to do, and then I move to the next student, the next student, the next student. And I can also lock those pages, which means that after I've assessed them, I don't want the students to be able to make changes, etc. So I can do that as well. All right, and I can also change whether I want it first name, surname, or surname, first name. It's entirely up to you how you want to do that. So that's the review student work pane, and that's really quite cool. Now I can create class notebooks. I can add and remove students from the class notebook. I can add and remove teachers if I'm collaborating with another teacher. But what I want to share with you that's really important is here, managing the notebooks. Now what that does is that opens up a, forgive me here. Hopefully it's going to let me log in because I'm in so many different notebooks on this machine. Here we go. So it brings me into the Manage Notebook section. Now, here's all my student sections. I could rename those or also create new sections from in the back end here. The teacher only section group is not automatically enabled. So when you start your page, you click that Manage Notebook, and then you come in and turn that on. Okay. Do I want to lock or unlock the collaboration space? I can do that from in there. And then also that's the entire collaboration space. And this is where I set my collaboration space permissions. All right. So I talked before about that I can differentiate and lock kids in and out of groups, etc. That all happens from that link in there. And I really hope this is going to not go too slow. You have to forgive me, I probably have possibly the worst internet in Australia. All right, so anyway, trust me, that's what happens in there. I can also send out parent and guardian links. Hopefully that's going to be a little bit faster. There we go. So I can send a read-only link to the parents to look at their student. Okay, I could copy that link and send it out by email. I could also create links for all my students and then send those out by email. And I can also get a link to the content library so the parents, excuse me, can see what their kids are doing. All right, so that's Class Notebook. Now, what I want to do before I start fielding questions about Class Notebook is I want to take you in and I want to show you what happens inside Teams. All right, so Class Notebook inside Microsoft Teams is actually quite cool. Now, what I did in that first webinar that we recorded is I sort of touched a little bit on this. All right, but there is a link for you here that will tell you, which will take you to all the instructional information around using Class Notebook in Teams. All right, so I just want to share with you that that's there. But let me come up into Teams up here. And you can see that when I create a class team, it automatically creates a class notebook. All right, so when I create a class team and I add my channels and I add my students, then we're automatically going to get this class notebook here. And you can see that inside Teams, we get the OneNote Online, which opens up inside. So just give that a moment. There we go. So this is the class notebook and it looks just like our online version, right? So here's the online version there, and you can see what that looks like. And here's the version inside Teams, also looks the same. And I can maximize that so I get more playroom if I want. But you can see there's a collaboration space, there's a content library, and there's all my individual students. Now, students can still open that in the browser or open it in the app if they want, and the changes they make will be reflected in the Teams version, and the Teams version will be reflected in their app version, etc. All right. The other thing too that I want to draw your attention to is when you create a class notebook just from here, it will create it in your personal OneDrive space, which means that it's just really fiddly if you leave the school and handing that on to someone. When we create it inside Teams, then it's created in the school space and we just hand the control of the team over to someone else, which is really easy to do. We just come up here and we would just add a member and then we would leave the team and that other person would take control of our class notebook. All right, now the other thing I want to share with you, which is important to note, is can you see here I've got these channels, and if you don't understand about how Teams works, please go back and watch our first webinar and I'll explain Teams to you. However, what's done is when we look, see here at literacy, in the literacy channel, for example, when we click on notes, it takes us into the collaboration space, into a new section called literacy. All right, so what that's doing is from the channels we can still access specific pages of the OneNote, and I'll show you what I mean. When we come back into the general tab and we click on the class notebook, and then we check on our collaboration space, you will see that the collaboration space has maths, literacy, Chinese, science, and if I was to create, if I was to jump in there, I could create social science as well. These are those notes sections that we saw in these other channels, all right? So you can see here I've got the maths notes, all right? That page is the same that if I came into the maths channels and went up to notes here, all right? But the control and the full features of our OneNote Class Notebook inside Teams happens in the general channel, and we click up there on Class Notebook, all right? Now, the other thing too to remember is that we have, when we add students to the team, they're automatically added to the Class Notebook, but we also have the assignment integration. All right, so again, go back and watch that first webinar where I talk all about assignments, but when you create an assignment, you actually get the choice of resources, and also that the student actually inputs and does the assignment inside. Have a look here when I click on add resources, I can actually link directly to pages in my class notebook. All right, so that's that existing class notebook, and I can add pages as resources, etc. All right, so keep that in mind. Really, really good. And again, that that link that I was sharing with you a moment ago, so you can get all the instructions around using class notebooks in Teams, is right there. Now, the #1 question I get when I talk to people about Teams is, hey, I love Teams, but I've already got an existing class notebook. How do I bring that class notebook over into Teams? So I know people have possibly already asked this question, and I'm answering it right now. And that is, when you set up a class notebook in Teams, it will give you the option to set it up from a blank notebook or to set it up from existing notebook content. And the instructions are all here. Now, I want to clarify, you cannot bring an existing class notebook into the team and have that full integration. You can link to it, but it will not be integrated. What you need to do is you need to set your team up. Then when you come into your class notebook, come from an existing notebook content, and it will copy much of your content across. All right, so it'll copy your content library across. All right, but then what you'll have to do is bring both of those down into the app and copy everything else across, or you can guide your students to do it. But all the instructions for that are down here. So I suggest that you go in and have a read of that if that's what you want to know. All right, now before we sort of wrap and talk about next steps, I think I'll stop there and I'll open up for questions.
Yeah, right. We've got a couple of them.
Yeah, sure.
So how do students open a new OneNote? I'm assuming meaning notebook?
How do students open a new OneNote? Okay, so if a student, okay, so you're just talking if a student wants to open, okay, I think I know what you mean. So basically what happens is if a student wants to open a new OneNote, they can come into office.com, click on OneNote, and create a new notebook, all right? But if you're inside the app, the Windows 10 app, all you need to do is you come up here to your notebooks, click the down arrow, and come down here to add notebook. All right, and you can create a new notebook that way.
Okay, moving on to the next one. If I make a page in the content library, can I push it out to 5 students who can edit it in their own space?
Yep, 100%. So again, what we looked at before is when I'm in my OneNote Class Notebook, I'll just come back to the main page. Oh, forgive me, this one here. If I find a page in the content library, so for example, if I'm up here in my content library, I'm in research methods and I want to send them this sampling and allocation, I can, when I click distribute page, I can do individual distribution, and now I can choose my individual students, right? Whether that's 1, 5, 10, I can select those and then they will all get a copy of that page. Great question.
Okay, next one is, when students make a PowerPoint at home, where can they put it on OneNote or Teams for me to view? So where's the best place to put a PowerPoint?
Yeah, sure. So, yep, good question. So you can insert a file into a OneNote page. So you could create a OneNote page, push that out to the students, call it, you know, whatever the name of the title is of that. So let me show you. So for example, I could create a new page. So I'm going to come into my content library. Let's go into assessments. Let's create a page called, you know, you might call it something else, but for sake of argument, we'll just call it PowerPoint. All right. And then what I do from that is I will distribute that page to all my students, okay, and decide what section I want it to go in, and then they will all have a template page called PowerPoint. And then what they need to do is click on Insert, and then they will click on File, okay, and let me show it to you in the app. It's probably just going to be a little bit easier. So what I can do is, imagine this is the page that I want. They just click on Insert, they click on File, they find their PowerPoint, and then they can insert it that way. The other thing you can do is you can actually set PowerPoints as assignments. Excuse me, I'm just going to find my inside Teams. So when I create a new assignment, I can actually set PowerPoint as my default template that the students are going to use. And then what happens is the students will actually all get a blank copy of that. They build that, and when they submit the assignment, then that will actually be all sent to me. But again, go back to our first webinar and explore the use of assignments inside Teams. Another very good question.
Okay, so next one is regarding assignments and quizzes. If I create a quiz in Forms, can I just send it to students in an email without them having to access Teams? Definitely.
Of course you can. Yep. So when you create a form, you get the ability to share it in different ways, and then you can you know, distribute that as a link in an email. No problem at all.
Okay. Then the last one. It's a really good one. Could you please demonstrate Immersive Reader?
You know what, we're going to have another webinar coming up soon where we're going to play around with Immersive Reader. I guess I can really quickly do that for you, but we'll go in depth in another webinar that we're going to have soon. So inside Word, inside OneNote, etc., we have Immersive Reader. If I click on this sample here, when I come up here into the View tab, and then click on Immersive Reader kicks in. And then Immersive Reader allows me to play and listen to the voice.
Last Christmas holidays I played with my puppy Brandy.
It also allows me to change the text size, the spacing, the fonts. It allows me to syllabify, highlight the parts of speech. It also allows me to have a line focus. It's got picture dictionary, so when I click on words, I get picture prompts, and it also allows me to translate. But we're going to have another webinar all about using Immersive Reader coming up soon.
Wonderful. And that's it.
Okay, excellent.
Sorry, it's Deb here. I just have one comment. For the schools that have their IT managed by CSA, they'll find that when you went into the managed notebook and they could provide a link for parents, they'll find that they probably won't be able to do that because external sharing of links is not allowed. So just to let those schools know.
Yeah, awesome. Really good to know. All right. So next steps. remember the OneNote Teacher Academy. So the link is down here, education.microsoft.com. Then search up the OneNote Teacher Academy and you will see that this is the best place for you to go. The second place I want you to be aware of is OneNoteforTeachers.com. OneNoteforTeachers.com's got a lot of information around using OneNote in the classroom. There's even some exemplars for class notebooks and things like that. Oftentimes, people who are new to OneNote will love this. People that have been using OneNote for a little while actually more enjoy this. All right, so keep an eye out for that one. 3 other things I want to draw your attention to is remote teaching and learning with Office 365, which we talked about at the beginning, aka.ms/Microsoft Remote Learning. The other one is OneNote Education on Twitter. So the Twitter handle is OneNote EDU. These guys are amazing for what they do in the Twitter space and the questions and stuff that people have, and they're really quick to answer. So please get in and have a bit of a play with that. And also there's support documents for educators at support.office.com/education. That's another one that I really want to stress is a great place for you to go and find out. Remembering too, your CSER resources are here, and we'll make these slides available to you soon, and you can also reach out to Deb. And then we're going to make the slides and recordings available to you in probably an hour or two. That'll be ready to be downloaded from that link there. But also, really importantly, this is where you get the links and the recordings and the slides from our previous webinars. All right, so you can bookmark that and go back to it and access our previous webinars and also the webinars that we're going to be releasing moving forward. Okay, so aka.ms/CSER webinars. The other thing is our MEC newsletter, aka.ms/MEC newsletter. That will give you, that's the Microsoft Educator Center newsletter. It'll give you all the latest, greatest releases and everything you need to know about what's cool and happening in the Microsoft education space. And if you want to reach out to me, you can find me on Twitter, you can find me on LinkedIn, and you can find me on Facebook. And there's my email address. All right, so I think that's pretty much it. We've pretty much come to the end of our time. So thanks very much for paying attention. I think Anna has definitely tried to answer your questions the best she can, but remember you can reach out to Deb or myself if you've got further questions. So thanks everyone, and we appreciate your time and we look forward to seeing you in our next webinar.